They called it the biggest solar flare in recorded history. The scientists said it was a once-in-a-century Carrington-level event, billions of tons of charged plasma blasting toward Earth at unimaginable speeds. But to most of us, it was just a weird storm on the horizon. The sun had been restless for days, sunspots growing, radio bursts crackling through space weather feeds. By midday, satellites warned of geomagnetic disturbances. Then it happened. The sky didn't explode like a bomb, it shimmered. A rippling wave of light, green, orange, and strange purples, danced across the stratosphere. And then the power blinked. Phones, computers, servers, all went dark. When they rebooted, everything was different. My name is Claire Jennings. I was at home when the lights flickered out. My phone went dead, and when it came back on, I realized something was wrong. The gallery was full, but none of the photos were mine. Faces I didn't recognize smiled back. Places I'd never been appeared in every frame. I tapped a picture of a family dinner. The food was foreign, the faces were foreign, but the laughter was hauntingly familiar. I tried calling friends. Contacts were scrambled, numbers reassigned, messages I never sent filled my inbox. Where are you? Help me, don't trust them. I wasn't alone. All over the world, people woke up to digital ghosts, screens filled with memories that weren't theirs, voices in voicemail boxes that weren't their own. Digital footprints mapped lives they never lived. Experts scrambled to explain. They blamed the solar flare's electromagnetic pulse. A massive geomagnetic storm had fried data centers and wiped satellites. But no one expected the data shift. Instead of erasing data completely, the flare seemed to have scrambled everything, swapping files, contacts, photos, even entire user profiles. One man in Tokyo woke to find his phone filled with photos of a child he'd never seen. In New York, a woman's tablet started playing videos of a man she'd never met, living a life she didn't know existed. Governments tried to control the panic. But the truth leaked. The flare had opened a doorway, a ripple in the digital fabric. And through that ripple, memories had spilled, like echoes leaking between realities. By day 2, social media flooded with posts from strangers claiming to have seen fragments of other lives inside their devices. Some thought it was a glitch. Others swore it was a message. The medical community reported increases in amnesia, deja vu, and dissociative episodes. People couldn't trust their own memories, because digital and biological memories began to bleed together. One elderly man from Arizona woke claiming he was living 2 lives, his own and someone else's. He recounted details about a city he'd never visited, a family he'd never met. Doctors labeled it fugue state. But he knew better. It was the flare. The sun had rewritten reality, and we were all waking in the new version. By the 3rd day after the solar flare, the world had changed in ways no one was prepared for. Phones and devices didn't just reboot with wrong photos, they rebooted with wrong lives. Entire digital histories, contacts, even emails belonged to strangers. Some people woke up not knowing who they were, because their digital selves, those constant, quiet mirrors of identity, were fractured. I saw it firsthand. My best friend, Marcus, called me frantic. His phone was flooded with messages in languages he didn't speak, photos of people he'd never met, living lives he couldn't imagine. His calendar was packed with appointments he'd never made. His bank accounts showed transactions in cities he'd never visited. And then came the nightmares. Marcus described them as memories, vivid and visceral. He dreamed he was someone else, someone running from something. I began to suspect the flare had done more than scramble data. It had merged realities. Digital lives weren't just files anymore. They were fragments of actual consciousness, slipping across a thin veil. At the hospital, doctors reported a surge in patients with sudden memory loss and identity confusion. Neurologists debated whether the solar flare had somehow triggered latent neurological effects. But those of us paying attention knew the truth was stranger. I spoke with Dr. Ramos, a neuroscientist working on brain-computer interfaces. She told me, the human mind isn't designed to compartmentalize perfectly. Memories, emotions, identities, they're fluid, malleable. She paused. Now imagine what happens when the digital and biological start bleeding into each other. The data was clear. Millions of people experienced memory overlap. They remembered lives and events they'd never lived. I watched a viral video of a woman from London holding a photo album filled with images of a family she didn't belong to. She whispered, "I don't know who these people are, but I feel their pain." Across the globe, support groups formed, not just for trauma, but for identity blending. People wanted to share their memories, to understand whose lives they had become. One man in Brazil posted a haunting confession. "I'm dreaming of a wife I never met and children I never had, but I can feel them, their warmth, their laughter." The government scrambled to respond, but the digital infrastructure was still too unstable. Satellites remained offline or corrupted, financial systems stalled. Hospitals faced chaos as patients came in confused, scared, often violent. In the midst of this, conspiracy theories flourished. Some claimed the flare was a deliberate attack on our reality. Others believed it was a signal, a message from beyond. A few whispered that we'd crossed into a multiverse bleed, but the real horror was in the details. The memories weren't random. They had patterns, locations, dates, people. Using open-source tools, a group of programmers and scientists began mapping these overlaps. They discovered clusters, nodes where memories coalesced. Cities like New York, Tokyo, Berlin, where large segments of the population shared fragments of the same unknown lives. And at the center of these nodes, a digital signature repeating across profiles, Echo Protocol 1.2. I found myself drawn into the underground forums where people exchanged their ghost memories. Stories of lives borrowed, stolen, or overlapped. I read about a woman who remembered dying, twice. About a man who could recount his own funeral from someone else's point of view. One post chilled me. They say the sun burned the sky open and leaked our pasts and futures into the present. I couldn't sleep. I started seeing flashes, snatches of other lives intruding into my thoughts. Sometimes I'd wake up knowing details about people I'd never met, names, places, feelings that didn't belong to me. I tried to ignore them, but it was like the memories were reaching for me, pulling me deeper. One evening, I caught my reflection in the dark window. My eyes looked back, but for a fraction of a second, they were not mine. They were older, weary, full of secrets I wasn't supposed to know. I knew then that the flare had done something irreversible. It hadn't just scrambled data. It had fractured reality. And now the lives we thought were our own were no longer safe. I stopped looking at my phone hours after the flare, not because it was broken, because I was afraid of what it might show me next. Every time I unlocked the screen, I saw more faces, strangers, unknown places, lives I had never lived. Sometimes the images flickered. Sometimes the photos moved like video frames frozen mid-motion. I began losing track of my own memories. What was mine? What had been overwritten? The line blurred. My reflection in the mirror felt distant, like I was watching someone else's life play out in my eyes. I asked the doctors if this was common. They told me it was psychological trauma, transient. But the nightmares told a different story. I dreamt I was trapped inside a phone screen, sliding endlessly through someone else's memories. Faces shifting, voices whispering. And then came the voices in waking life. People I'd never met calling my name. Friends and family who denied knowing me. I felt like a ghost haunting my own world. I joined an online group, a refuge for those like me. We called ourselves the Echoes, sharing memories that weren't ours, trying to hold on to who we were, but the more we shared, the weaker we became. Our minds tangled in a web of borrowed lives. One night, I dreamt of the sun again, but this time it wasn't a bright orb. It was a black hole, sucking light and memory alike. And inside that void, I saw my own face screaming, not in pain, in recognition. I woke up knowing the truth. The flare didn't just erase data, it rewrote it. And we are no longer the authors of our own stories. The memories we carry are borrowed. The lives we live are echoes. And the future? It's not ours. It belongs to the void that watched us from the sky.